Number 15. It's not a secret nor a huge surprise that some of the toughest schools in the world are located in China. However, some of them, with their rigorous school policies, are definitely reinventing the term brutality. We're not quite sure what can get you this kind of an unorthodox punishment, but you can rest assured that this is a legitimate form of disciplining the disobeying Chinese school kids. Believe it or not, some kids were forced to kneel on their knees for quite a long and painful period of time. The worst thing is that you have to experience close encounters with some of the following skin-piercing friends, such as peas, rice, or the very popular corn. In addition, when you're experiencing this kind of school brutality, you aren't allowed to do a thing with your hands. There's only one position allowed for them to be, and that's high up in the air. We're talking about hours and hours you have to spend in this painful and uncomfortable position. To make things worse for poor Chinese kids in schools, their parents support these kinds of middle-aged brutality. We sure hope they don't apply these educational techniques at home as well. Number 14. Our story about the most brutal schools on Earth continues in Arizona in the United States. You may find it a little bit hard to believe that such a wonderful thing as love can actually be turned against you. In case you end up fighting with your school friends, or more likely school enemies, in the Westwood High School in Mesa, Arizona, then you're going to experience one quite unusual form of school brutality. You'll be forced to hold hands with your previous school adversaries for hours and hours. Obviously, the school wants you to love your enemy, so your hands you used a moment ago for a fistfight will now have a completely different role. This form of kind school brutality can be equally unpleasant and painful, just like any other more direct and physical form of school brutality. The worst part is definitely to face your school buddies once you're done with the hands-holding punishment. It comes without saying that this second part of the penalty, you just can't avoid. Number 13.
Learning new things in school is supposed to be fun. At least, this is what theory has to say about it. However, what's happening with the bitter and brutal school practice in Florida? Well, in one school in Florida, both parents and the school itself forced school children to wear embarrassing scarlet letters consisting of short notes about not such impressive school achievements. Imagine yourself walking all over your school with a sign on you saying, "We all know what you didn't do properly this summer." That's the main trouble with direct and indirect forms of school brutality. Thanks to our prejudices and narrow-minded ideas about school brutality practices, we often tend to imagine only the physical punishment. However, the most painful part is associated with our shaken and compromised social image in the school. This scarlet letter practice in Florida perfectly illustrates and supports this claim. One thing is more than certain: this unorthodox case of school policy brutality. The kids experiencing these punishments will certainly do their homework with no hesitation to the best of their knowledge.
Number 12.
Believe it or not, the school kids in Texas are facing tough choices. If something goes wrong with your homework and various assignments, especially the ones being shamelessly copied or plagiarized, then you're going to face the paddling trouble. Yes, you heard well. There's a paddling penalty in the 21st century and in the middle of the most prosperous technological revolution our world has ever witnessed. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know all too well what the paddling is all about, do you? We sure hope for the well-being and reputation of the students that the paddling process isn't being executed publicly. Otherwise, the school brutality in Texas can be treated as one of the most regressive ones in the country. We tend to treat as the most progressive in the whole world, right? Just imagine the school's Punisher, who resembles some sort of notorious Hollywood characters in this matter, while paddling kids all over school. What a dreadful thought to associate with any school, especially the one in Texas.
Number 11.
What's happening in Florida? I mean, it seems that we have quite a few reasons to believe that Florida can be easily promoted into one of the unofficial capitals amongst the most brutal schools on our planet. If you've seen the great Pixar animated movie Up, then you know how a school in Florida came up with the bizarre idea of introducing the cone of scholar shame for the less obedient students. So, what is this brutal school practice all about? Okay, imagine a plastic collar used for dogs around your neck. Yeah. The original purpose of this special collar is to make sure that our beloved pets don't hurt themselves while recovering from their wounds. Again, the most brutal schools in the world have proven themselves to be the ones most closely related with the brutal forms of various embarrassments. We sure hope that this school isn't going to get some additional funny ideas, including the ones to make students bark or follow pets' behavior in some equally embarrassing way. Maybe it's simply better to miss some of the more favorited animated movies, such as Up. I mean, we can hardly imagine what could happen to our school system if we closely apply all we see in them. Right?
Number 10.
One elementary school in New Jersey has quite an efficient way of making sure that students are carefully handling all food and liquids within the school premises. In case you're being too energetic and you happen to spill water or food on the school floor, then something unimaginable may easily happen to you. This school exercises a special form of brutality, which asks of you to eat off the school floor. So, in this school you may be easily forced to forget about tables and chairs. Just sit on the school floor and enjoy your meal. The next time, you'll be more careful about leaving something behind or spilling on the gentle school floor. We don't even dare to guess what would happen if you forget to turn in your homework on time. Who knows, maybe the students are forced to forget about forks and knives as well. Yet, for what it's worth, any form of school brutality is better than starvation in your classroom, right? Finally, this kind of practice brings us back and closer to our roots. You'll be in touch with nature in a way you didn't quite expect or want.
Number 9.
We've seen that some schools can be quite brutal when it comes to the discipline and learning process. However, what one school has applied in Idaho will definitely knock you off your feet. Have you ever dared to imagine that your own face could be used as a blackboard in a school? Well, from what we've heard, this is a common and legitimate practice in one school in Idaho. So in this particular situation, you either do what you're required to do in school, or your school buddies are going to use your face for drawing. We're not imagining or exaggerating things in the school brutality scenarios. In other words, when you see a kid in this school with the Indian warrior face paint, then you know for sure that he or she must have done something wrong about the homework or other school-related tasks. Who knows, maybe the teachers in this school are up to something huge and new in the world of arts. You're encouraging kids to develop their painting skills with this brutal school practice. It's easy for us to say, but we can only imagine how the kids in the school feel about it.
Number 8.
What's your natural and most often reaction when someone sneezes next to you? Well, you say bless you or gesundheit or something like that, right? It's as simple and predictable as that. However, if you're a student in some of the high schools in California, you're going to think twice before you do such a thing. Why? Well, in case you say bless you to some of your classmates just after you hear them sneeze, your teacher can give you a lower grade, just like that. What's the justification for such a brutal school practice? Well, some of the teachers in high schools all over California treat this kind of behavior as being extremely disruptive for the learning process. Seriously? We dare you to imagine what kind of punishment you can experience firsthand in California if you continue to make or respond to other natural and common noises related to our body. Well, here's a golden word of advice for the high schools in California. Be careful what you eat before you go to school.
Number 7.
Perhaps Edward Scissorhands is one of your most favorite movie characters, and you would have nothing against Johnny Depp playing with your hair. However, in one Milwaukee school, there's a local teacher who's more like Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series than the adorable monster that Johnny Depp is. In this school, if you end up playing with your hair more than using a pencil to solve homework tasks, a teacher may also play, meaning that you can get an unexpected haircut, which may not necessarily follow your aesthetic expectations and instructions. It's really hard to believe that nowadays someone can cut off your hair in a classroom as part of a school practice. The worst thing about Milwaukee Scissorhand teachers is that they can get away with this fashion crime. Every now and then they pay a symbolic fine, and then they continue with their scissor punishment practice. It seems that the Vin Diesel hairstyle is the only solution for this Milwaukee horror school. If there's nothing for the teachers to cut off, then there's nothing for you to worry about. Poor Milwaukee kids. We can only imagine their hairstyles when a prom season approaches.
Number 6.
We're pretty much convinced that the brutal schools worldwide reached the very peak of their brutality when it comes to the treatment of students with special needs, or even worse, the less privileged ones. This is exactly what happened to an autistic boy in one school in Florida. The Port St. Lucie school was more than autistic in its behavior when inadequately treating one of its students. How brutal do you have to be to cast out a boy suffering from autism? What makes this school brutally brutal about its unacceptable practice are public discussions among students and teachers with the shameful voting outcome. Let's see how problematic our classroom is. Then let's discuss his or her special needs and problems. Finally, let's vote whether or not we want to accept them among us. It's unbelievable that this kind of brutal school practice can be exercised in the 21st century in one of the most developed countries in the world. This school with its brutal techniques can literally make you ill, even if you're enlisted in perfect health condition.
Number 5.
If you think that you've seen it all with the brutal example associated with the Port St. Lucie school in Florida, then you should wait to hear what we have to say about the brutal school practices in Mississippi. If you don't play by the rules in some of the schools in Mississippi, you can easily end up being punished in the most brutal and embarrassing way. Can you believe that a school can go as far as organizing a special but fake prom in order to punish your unsuitable behavior, choice, or appearance? This is exactly what happened to a lesbian student and her 5 friends with mental disabilities. Unfortunately, that's only the beginning of brutality. The school district, which has obviously reinvented the meaning of true brutality, can even decide to organize 2 prom parties at the same time, but at different places. The first regular one will be reserved for suitable students. On the other side, there will be a second alternative one for those who dare express different and less orthodox life choices. Hoo boy, we sure hope that the very next thing in Mississippi isn't going to be associated with fake parallel schools.
Number 4.
It's a sad fact that the numerous reports about brutal incidents within the school walls have become a normal thing you have to face with each and any day. However, one high school in Indiana has decided to change something about it. Believe it or not, the brutal attacks and fighting amongst students are part of the regular extracurricular activities in Indiana. No one will lift a finger if someone breaks yours while you're in the school. This high school has become a true MMA school in the worst possible scenario you can possibly imagine. It seems that you have to be quite brutal if you want to survive in this school. We sure hope that the teachers themselves aren't giving grades according to your fighting performance. We're also not quite sure whether or not this school has planned some tournaments or some similar activities to deal with this kind of brutal practice. Oh dear. Who do you have to challenge as part of your final exam? So far, only the students are the inevitable part of this unimaginable school brutality. Yet, it's only a matter of time before the teachers decide to join the party, right?
Number 3.
What's every kid's worst nightmare? Well, that has to be a pitch-black closet you've only seen in horror movies. It seems that we have to go back to Texas one more time. We aren't looking forward to exaggerating, but Texas has huge chances to end up being one of the top states with the most brutal schools in the whole world. Now imagine the following worst nightmare case scenario, which actually takes place in your own school. You've done something wrong about your lessons or homework, and the next thing you know, you end up in a pitch-black closet. Is this brutal or what? To tell you the truth, this scene sounds as if it's been borrowed from some horror movie rather than an innocent school in Houston, Texas. To make things even worse for the kids worldwide, some other teachers believe this was a great disciplinary measure. A couple of schools in Washington didn't include punishment closets, but seriously considered special pitch-black rooms. Seriously? What's next, a medieval torture chamber? It seems that when it comes to school brutality, only your imagination is the limit.
Number 2.
Now, if you were shocked by the terrifying story about the Texas school brutality, which included a pitch-black closet, wait until you hear what's going on in good old Kentucky. Here's one more example of claustrophobic school brutality. However, in Kentucky, instead of closets or rooms, they're using the so-called therapy bags for punishment, meaning they literally put kids in a bag for a certain amount of time. Compared to this school brutality technique, the previous pitch-black closet seems like a 5-star hotel. Even the biggest bag in the world can't provide you with the minimum comfort to normal functionality. One thing comes without saying in this situation. There's no way you'll miss doing your homework. Ever. Just imagine a schoolroom with a line of punishment bags. We sure hope that some horror fan teacher isn't going to come up with an idea of combining punishments. For instance, you can put the kid in a therapy bag, then leave the bag in a pitch-black closet or room. Hoo boy. This would be 2-in-1 school brutality at its best.
Number 1.
You've probably been wondering by now, who's our lucky winner? Well, what's a school without its own school police? And if you're going to have your special school police officers, then make sure they're brutal according to your expectations. Before you know it, in a charming high school in Spring Valley, the so-called school police are taking care of ensuring the peace and order, even if it means to slam and drag students all over the classroom floor. We aren't quite sure if the school police force has school prisons at its disposal as well. It's already scary enough that you can be attacked and arrested in the middle of your school for a crime of not doing your homework or having a quarrel with your school buddies, for instance. This type of school brutality allows you to become a criminal at a very young age. The premise in this case is quite simple. If you're having trouble with the police, then you're embracing the dark side of the law, right? Here's an idea. When you're watching our list winner, you should definitely listen to the Inner Circle / Bob Marley's timeless hit, Bad Boys. And it goes something like this. Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when we come for you? Really, what are you gonna do when the school police come for you? I just wanted to thank Top 15 for letting me help them out with this video. I hope you guys liked it. And if you liked my voice, go ahead and click the link in the description to go check out my channel. I do Let's Plays, acapellas, and music covers.
Got an idea for a top 15 list? Submit it at top15s.net/submit. Be sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching.